Hi, welcome everyone to today's webinar. We are so excited to have you all here. My name is Laura Gousset. I'm with LSVT Global and I'll be the moderator for our webinar today. I'm really excited to have this webinar because it's one of our very favorite companies that we know of that provides LSVT Big and LSVT Loud, called On With Life out of Iowa. And we have two very special guests with us here today who I'll introduce in a moment that are going to tell you about their amazing program, how they built it, and the whole journey. Thus, that's the title of our webinar today is Serving the Parkinson's Population. It's about the journey. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as you are entering from the waiting room and joining us during this webinar. All right, and Gail, give me a thumbs up that you can share, that you can see my screen. All right, good. Thank you so much for that. All right, so with us today, our panelists are Tammy Miller and Gail McGahee, both from On With Life. Tammy is an occupational therapy assistant, but wears many hats and is in a leadership role at On With Life, as is Gail, who's a physical therapist. They work side by side, and just really excited to share some information about them today. I won't read through their biographies, but know that they both have extensive experience over the last 25 plus years in neurological rehabilitation. Are LSVT Big certified, at least Gail is, I believe, and have done a tremendous amount to bring rehabilitation for people with neurological disorders in the Iowa area, both, really at all stages of the game. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. A few disclosures for you. Tammy is an employee of On With Life, and of course is compensated for that with salary. The same with Gail, and she also sits on the board of the American Parkinson's Disease Association Iowa chapter. I myself an employee of LSVT Global as well. Right now in this webinar, your microphones are muted, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions, and we would just really encourage you to take advantage of this time that you have to pick the brains of Gail and Tammy, learn as much as you can about their valuable experiences. We will have a Q&A time at the end. So at any time, enter your questions or your comments into the chat, show them some love throughout. If there's things that really resonate with you, we'll save those questions and comments for the end so that they can really be focused on their presentation. So if you don't see an answer right away in the chat, don't worry, we will get to it at the end. In a few moments, I will upload the handout. It's a PDF handout of the slides from today that you will be able to download. Those may also have come to you in email format, so check your email for that. At the end of the webinar or when you exit it, a survey link should pop up. We would love to have your feedback of whether you enjoyed this webinar, if it was technically good, any ideas you have for future webinars. So please take a minute and complete that survey. A little bit of information on continuing education units. If you're a therapist joining us today, this is just the information on how to report your CE activity to ASHA. If you're an SLP professional, I won't read through this here, but know that you can receive CE credit for both the live version or if you're listening to this as an on-demand version, since this webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions about how to do that, email webinars@lsvtglobal.com. And then for PT and OT professionals, this is not pre-approved for CEs. However, if your state allows for self-reported CEO credit, you can definitely use this as long as you attend for the full hour. And we will email you a certificate that you can use to claim those CEUs. The learning objectives for today's webinars are listed here. By the end of the webinar, you should be able to highlight key areas of marketing to initiate a comprehensive marketing Parkinson's program, like On with Life, list the components needed in a quality comprehensive Parkinson's program via the domains of care, and identify the various needs of a person with Parkinson's and their care partners throughout their Parkinson's journey. So before I turn the baton or the screen over to Gail and Tammy, just want to pull up a little bit of a poll so that we know who is joining us today. So just give me 1 minute to launch this poll. It's very easy. And I think it should be launched. If you, yep, there you go. I'll give you a few seconds to do that, and then I'll share the results. Okay, looks like I'm going to give it a few more seconds. We're up to about 75% of you have participated in the poll, so that's fine. Okay. And it looks like you can see here 18% are people with Parkinson's or other neurological conditions. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. I think you'll find this information really helpful. We have a family, friend, or caregiver. That's great. We've got some LSVT certified clinicians. Really great. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day. Some other healthcare professionals. So wonderful. We have a really great mix, and that's what this is all about. All right. Sorry if you didn't get the poll link. I think it was up on the screen, but I might have closed it too soon. Okay. All right. So take it over, Gail and Tammy. And if you want to give a little more information and background on who you are, I think everyone would love to learn more about that too.
Sounds good. All right. Can everybody hear us okay?
Yep. Can hear it and see it. So you're looking good.
Yay, we did it right.
Are they going to respond back?
I know, I just realized that. All right.
Hello, I'm Gail McGahee, physical therapist, LSVT, big clinician, a lot of other letters behind that. And you are?
Tammy Miller, and I'm the director of outpatient services here at On with Life, and it's exciting to see a nice array of different people participating. So we'll try to kind of tailor some points to, I mean, obviously we wrote this, it's about the journey of Parkinson's, but how we built our program and what we looked at. And we'll try to point out, since we have some people with, and I'm going to have to watch the use of my hands because I'm a hand person. What we will try to incorporate some stuff related to persons with Parkinson's as well, to make sure we bring that point of what you should look for when you're looking for a comprehensive program as well. So.
Yeah, and honestly, just a brief background about both of us. Both of us have spent our career in neuro, and a lot of it was in inpatient rehab initially. I did about 15 years. I think you were right around the same,
yeah,
maybe a little less. Yeah. And I've been in now outpatient setting for the last 12 years. And one of the really cool things that we've always treated, and particularly from a neuro standpoint, is we've always treated people that were neurotraumatic, meaning they've had an event, something has occurred, and yet they're going to get better. Whereas when we think of the Parkinson's population, it's a neurodegenerative disorder. And so we need to make sure that we're changing the things that we're providing for people based off of what's happening currently in their lives because of the progression of the disease.
And you'll see how we learned that with the start of this program as we talk through today.
And so you will hear us talk about On with Life. We're not promoting us. I mean, I think we're pretty cool, but we're not promoting us, but it's our perspective and kind of what we've learned through the years of really since 2013.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, so as those of you that are LSVT trained and you are clinicians or clinicians in something else, you should know about what Parkinson's is, but for the people with Parkinson's that are on, really what we want to just briefly talk about is what is Parkinson's. And what we know is that it affects the dopamine producing neurons. And those neurons have a really huge effect on your executive function, your motor control, your motivation, arousal, reinforcement, and reward. And so when we think about those 4 cardinal symptoms that a lot of people see after they get diagnosed with Parkinson's, or those things that we see is the bradykinesia, the postural instability, rigidity, tremors, and those tend to be the big 4. But really what a key point is that not everybody has tremor, and that often can lead to misdiagnosis with a lot of people. 70% have tremor, but a lot of people don't have tremor. So it takes them a while to circumvent the whole process to be able to be diagnosed. And we'll figure out how to change a slide here.
Yeah, our slides are not moving, Laura. I don't know if you can. We're
Oh,
you got it. Got
got
it. Good
excited.
job.
Sorry. And another little, just very briefly, what is Parkinson's? It's the dopamine is found within the substantia nigra, which is where we have that motor control. We have the amygdala, which gives us our emotion formation and our processing. It's also part in the hippocampus, which is our working memory, the long-term memory, and also within the olfactory bulb. And so what's interesting just even about Parkinson's in general is oftentimes there's sort of like this mark of prodromal symptoms. So a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. But one of the things that can tend to happen initially is people have a lack of sense of smell. And these prodromal things can even happen 20 years up to when the motor symptom onset is. And so I very often will talk to people and ask them, hey, when did you lose your sense of smell? And you'll have individuals who tell you 20 years, 15 years, something like that. So that's always one of those key factors or interesting factors that I think are important to ask individuals. Gotten really excited there again. For those that are not clinicians, your MDS or your movement disorder specialist or your neurologist or scientist, they will utilize the modified Hoehn-Yahr. So you'll hear an H and Y. And basically what it's giving you is giving you a score on the symptomology. And so early on in those symptoms, you might be classified as a stage 1, meaning you might have like the pill roll, or you might have just a little slight tremor. When you get into 1.5, you have that plus axial involvement, meaning maybe you're not swinging your arms, or maybe your body's not rotating. Stage 2 gets into bilateral disease, but we haven't lost our balance yet. All the way down to, you guys can read those from a Hoehn-Yahr standpoint, but where it becomes a little bit more difficult is when we get into stage 3, when we have postural instability and individuals lose their balance on the pull test. And so that's part of the UPDRS, the pull test. You get into stage 4, severe disability, and stage 5 would be someone who's considered to be wheelchair bound or bedridden.
So just to give you a picture, we wanted to give you a picture of what kind of facility we come from, because I think it helps maybe explain the journey from how we built our programming. And so On With Life actually was started over 30 plus years ago because it was an inpatient program. And we have a 28-bed post-acute skilled facility that allows us to do longer term rehab. We have a long-term rehab program for youth and younger adults. We have a supportive community living program, which is now turned into a day program that's adjusting with people in the community. Then we have our outpatient program. And it's the outpatient program that really we began building this Parkinson's community from. In addition to that, we do have a CARF accreditation in most of our programs, in adults and pediatrics for CHIRP, outpatient, brain injury, stroke, residential, and home and community based. So just a little bit of a background of where we're going to be coming from in what we're going to be talking about over the next few slides. So this is actually where we started. So in January 2011, we had this little modular home. We called it the outhouse. And it was sitting here on our grounds. It's now, as we've grown and expanded, it has now become a family house where our person served and families can stay for free when they come to our programs, because we get quite a few people in Iowa. There's a lot of rural communities that don't have specialized services, particularly for Parkinson's, and so we can get people that will drive 3 hours one way just to come to therapy with us. And so it's kind of fun to see how it's kind of come full circle, that now that we have a new building that we'll show you later, this where we started is now a family house that can house some of our people when they come for outpatient therapy if they want to spend the night. So we resided in this little yellow house in 2011 to 2015. And it was, our very first year of therapy there, we saw 30 people. It was really, back then, it was really thought of more of an extension to our continuum of services and really about serving our inpatient population. We didn't necessarily think about branching out that much at the time. And our inpatient program at the time was primarily brain injury and stroke. And so what began happening is that people would hear about the experience that they were having with us. And our approach was just a little bit different than what people were typically getting in an orthopedic outpatient setting. And so people would keep wanting to come to us, and it just kept really growing. And after we did our first year and we started seeing more referrals, we really figured out, okay, if we're going to make a go of this, we need to figure out how we're going to sustain and continue our programming. And that's kind of where we started looking at what other populations of people are not being served here in the central Iowa area. And that's kind of where we came across Parkinson's and trying to look at, is that something we can serve? Well, we actually had hired Gail, and she came to us already with the LSVT certification. And so she was LSVT Big certified. It's not something we had heard of yet. In fact, it really wasn't in Iowa at all at that point. There was just a few therapists back then certified, but no one was really offering a program or a comprehensive programming in Iowa. And those that know Gail or get to know Gail is when she has an idea, she doesn't really let up on it. And she spent a lot of time, and I'm going to use this term, educating us on the benefits of this potential opportunity, that we had to bring this to the community of persons with Parkinson's, that it was so underserved and unmet. And then she really was asking, so really, why not Parkinson's? And that's really how we then began delving deeper, looking at what services are available, what could we offer, what does our mindset of how we treat brain injury kind of fit into this?
Yeah.
Because we weren't gonna, if we were gonna do it, we weren't gonna just half-ass. Oh, can I say that?
But I mean, I think what you're saying too is that we are renowned in the Iowa area, really Midwest area, as a brain injury facility. That you have people that come here that are in coma. It's brain injury, CVA, MVA, kinds of accidents and strokes. And that's what we were known for. And when we actually started outpatient, that was sort of like the bread and butter. But then we have this additional thing of Parkinson's. And I think, why not? Like,
Right.
Why are we not serving this population?
Yeah, so that's where we went from there. We started then educating ourselves on what are the statistics. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
And we started really kind of looking at what are the Iowa statistics. Well, in Iowa specifically, the incidence of newly diagnosed back in 2012 was about 40 to 50,000. And now it's 90,000. in the US, it's now 1 million people in the US with Parkinson's.
And growing.
And growing. And so that was kind of the first thing that we did. There was lots of discussion and still continues to be discussion on how the environmental exposures may contribute. Well, we're in the Midwest, and many of our people were raised rurally,
Gotcha.
and on well water, and this as well as has a high prevalence of pesticide use in Iowa. And there's lots of studies that suggest that maybe this might have some influence as well. And so those kind of things were all things that we were talking about and figuring out. And then the next thing we did was really look at the competition, our community analysis. So we did a SWOT analysis of what do we have out there. And really no other outpatient program was offering big and loud at the time. And like we had mentioned earlier, there might have been one big therapist certified in Iowa at the time, but actually nobody was practicing or utilizing it and letting people know that they were utilizing it as a PD intervention. And so that kind of for us was, this is a
There's an
no-brainer,
opportunity.
right? Like we then began looking at what's the cost if I have staff educated. And well, in hindsight, I mean, you really look at it, there's really not a lot of outputting from the business standpoint of it. There's not a lot of output that required us from a business to get people LSVT certified, right? It doesn't take a lot of extra equipment. It just really takes that education and knowledge. So that is kind of what set us on this forward portion of where we go. I also want to just state quick that, one of the things that makes us special at On With Life, and this is often times seen in not-for-profits more than for-profit organizations, is that we're privately owned. And so we didn't have to jump through a bunch of red tape to get this started and to trial stuff. We literally, for the most part, decided, okay, we're going to do this. We sent somebody to the training. We started the program the week they came back. And the thought process always was, if it doesn't work, well, we just gave our therapists knowledge that they could take for some people. I don't think any of us expected it to work as well as it did. and kind of become a huge part of our program that to this day, we see more Parkinson's programming in our clinic than we see any other diagnosis. And we have a clinic that we now have 2 clinics, and we see about 1,500 people a year. So we just, it was worth the leap for us. So next steps for us were to train our staff. No other program offering the big by PT and OT. So we thought we would, we have Medicare beneficiaries. A lot of our people are Medicare served, and the caps can make that difficult. And so we knew we wanted to train both a PT and an OT so that we could have the PT treat 2 days a week, the OT treat 2 days a week, and we could share that pot of money are their benefits. We also made being trained, like when we hired new staff, the expectation was, and we paid for the training, but the expectation was that they would need to be LSVT trained therapists and be committed to getting that.
And be committed to being big.
Yes.
So in sending our very first OT there, her story is historically, she's just a very, very quiet, introverted OT. And she went to the course quiet and she came back really big. And we were completely shocked. And this is a person who's so introverted, but now she is one of the biggest proponents of the bigness and not just, and the calibration component. So not just like during session, but she does it with our CVAs and our TBIs, and she's just always big now.
So she's been doing it like 10 years now. And it's funny, you still see her walking big in the hallways from session to session, even if they're not Parkinson's people. And it's fun to see how that's carried over to her. As far as doing marketing and reaching out to the community, we did a lot of lunch and learn type things or coffee hours, PD support groups. We went to events, we did interviews. We really just tried to share our story. Back then, our main newspaper did a big story. One of our first, so back then we did it in groups. And
not groups, it was groups of people.
Yes, groups of people. Yeah, sorry. Groups of people at the same time, meaning we had 4 people we'd rotate through each month. They'd have individual sessions, but they'd rotate it through at the same time. And these 2 friends essentially ended up going through it together. And they talked about, did this big newspaper story on them and sharing that. So trying to take opportunities like that, reaching out to providers. But the providers really were hard to access, and they didn't necessarily, again, it was something new. It takes time for providers to have that buy-in. So really for us, it was reaching out to the people and educating persons with Parkinson's and their care partners, what this could do for them. So we started by rotating every 4 weeks. We did the 4 people in that 4-week period. We rotated
in a row. Now listen, if you are big certified and you had to be big for 4 hours in a row, it was a lot. So there's an aha moment.
Yeah,
Don't do that.
We didn't put that in the aha at the end, but we should have.
And I, at that point, used to come like tank top, shorts, and so exhausted after doing 4 hours of big and being big the whole time.
It seemed like a good idea.
So don't do that.
It seemed like a good idea, but it did tire people out. As we got more people certified and we could spread it out, it became better, but
it was rough.
But then approximately 4 to 5 months after we did that, we decided we wanted to do an LSVT check-in that we offer 1 time a month, where people can come back for free. And we started noticing that our care partners were meeting and talking in the waiting room and having their own kind of support and sharing happening. So all these things are happening, and we're just kind of watching and noticing. And that's kind of what took us to the next step
level.
So here we, we realized the significant. It was at this point that we really began to kind of notice that there was more to this, much like the iceberg theory.
Mm-hmm.
Like we started noticing that our people that were doing big, because we had started tracking our
pre and post,
and they would get a report card to show the difference. And some of them were showing 40% improvement. And so you would always share with them.
I mean, my comment was always like, if you gave me $1,000 and I told you that I could give you a 40% improvement in $1,000 in 4 weeks, wouldn't you buy in? And people really kind of understood that analogy. And for real, a 40% improvement in your mobility is huge for all the therapists out there. You know that. That's ginormous to have that. And I would say traditionally, like our thought process was like, traditionally we had, my experience with people with Parkinson's was the 4 and 5s. They were in inpatient rehab. Something had happened. There was a fall. We were rigid. We had med issues, those kinds of things. But with this programming, what we were finding is we literally were getting people that were diagnosed a month ago. So hardly any symptoms, hardly anything that was going on. And yet they were going to buy into this 4-week big program, which was huge. Mm-hmm. And so we had to figure out how to even adapt to that, because those were the kinds of people that we are not traditionally seeing. Mm-hmm. So we know that all the stuff that we see on the top is our tremors, the rigidity, the slowness, the postural changes. And those were the things that we expected.
Yes. But what we found was more so, and go ahead, I'll let you continue to talk about this, because I've been talking a lot, but
she'll take over anyway.
I will.
Right. Really what we discovered is, and again, because this was sort of our naivety, is that there was such an array of symptomology, and that we really needed to figure out. Our biggest aha moment was we had to treat these individuals differently than what we had with our traditional TBI, CVA. And what we, what we started to notice is that people began to come back to us for tune-up. So yeah, we saw them for 4 weeks, they went on their way, and now all of a sudden they were coming back to us and things were changing. And we needed to figure out like what did we need to do to be able to address the symptoms for these individuals. And I think one thing that we haven't said yet, and if you have worked with individuals with Parkinson's, they are a vocal group. They will tell you what they want. They will demand for you to provide with, the education and the resource. It's amazing because it had also allowed us
advocates.
Yeah, they're huge advocates for themselves and for the others. And what we really, really discovered was that we needed to figure out how to treat and incorporate the invisible symptoms with this population. And it was a big learning opportunity for us as well. And really what we discovered, it was a much bigger part of the picture than just the 4 cardinal tremors, rigidity, slowness, and postural changes.
Yeah, I think when we think a little bit about, this is really where, when we started taking that approach, like we had done some research with a local university with our outcomes, and it was incredible what LSVT was doing for people. Like, I think it was one of those things that I will admit that I was like, okay, Gail, like, is it really going to live up to what you're telling me? Like, as the director of a program and trying to figure out what's the best for our programming. And she just kept pushing and pushing. And finally I was like, whatever, we'll just do it. But she kept telling me it would have this drastic effect on our people. But I've been a therapist for a long time. And it's not very often that you find something that has the kind of carryover that we would see when we would do LSVT big and loud with our people. And so you would drastically see a difference in that period of time. And that's kind of what took us down the road. And we got so excited of LSVT that's what we first built our program on.
That's all we did.
Yes.
It's all we did was LSVT.
We just rotated.
And loud. Don't forget, we did loud too.
Yeah, we just rotated people through an LSVT big and loud and didn't necessarily think about how we needed to carry through those LSVT principles, because just like you or I, well, maybe you're better than me, but I'm allergic to exercise. And, sometimes it's easy to just be like, I'd have to take a lot of Benadryl if I exercise too much. So I would you stop doing your exercise. Well, our people with Parkinson's do the same thing, right? Like they stop doing what they should and they start backsliding. And the progression of the disease, it can happen fast. And so we just didn't really think as comprehensively as we should have, basically. And that's kind of like where we're headed with the next few slides, is talking about that. So, and because we were growing and our popularity was increasing, we had to build on to our inpatient main building. And this is just a picture of that building. We built on the second half of this this is the part that we built on that was dedicated for outpatient services. We were seeing at this point 450 persons served a year. Our case mix back then was about 25% to 30% of Parkinson's. And then we also opened a satellite clinic in Eastern Iowa just because of that. But this is when we also began seeing these offshoots of Parkinson's. So we would start seeing the MSAs, the PSPs, those sorts of things, because people with these neurological disorders were just getting sent to us, not necessarily fully understanding what they were. So this was also where we had another aha moment. This is when we began identifying the challenges. So we began adding more staff because we were getting bigger, and then we had more hands in the pot, and staff did the online. This is about in the time, COVID time, we started having more staff that did the online training. But even right before COVID, I think it was, you guys started offering the training online. And we were noticing the staff that did the online training was a little bit different than the staff that had gone in person. And so all these potential challenges to how, now that we had more staff in the mix, how they might each be delivering the service a little bit different. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did is that we were as consistent as possible for our person served. And that really took us to the development of our comprehensive programming and our domains of care that we could utilize as a guiding document for our staff, and making sure that we didn't forget to address the complex needs of our people. And so I'm going to let you take it from there.
Okay. So now we're like, oh, wow, we have to create this comprehensive program. And through our other programming, we have decided to do domains of care. And why do we do that? Really, our domains of care sort of are guiding principles. So basically, it would mean that any therapist could go to the domains of care and really make sure that we were hitting every single angle that people with Parkinson's are affected by, and anything that's being associated with. And it allowed us to really take that comprehensive look, thinking of all of the options, but also allowing it for therapists, prompting therapists to make sure that they are asking relevant questions and exploring all the avenues of disability, and really getting out of the head of those 4 cardinal symptoms. What else is going on? Because we know that we're neurodegenerative and things will always change. It really allowed therapists to have an action plan, and sort of and gave them that, like, what's going to be the best thing that needs to be addressed for their issues, and also that we're providing consistent quality of care. We know that that's really important, but also providing it in a transdisciplinary approach. We very much so operate not interdisciplinary, but transdisciplinary, where we basically are, I always say this, we're all up in each other's business. And so that's okay. PT, OT, speech, we can all be in on the sort of the same goals, but coming from different angles. And so that's how we operate quite frequently. To go over sort of like what the review is what we did is we designed a committee who identified these target areas per discipline, and that we researched the best practices, and we ended up coming up with these 8 domains, which we know are really important for people with Parkinson's. Ultimately, this design was so successful, we've actually carried that out through other discipline design throughout our facility. So we use it with stroke, with spinal cord, PD, and we also do post-concussive. And so it really is this guiding principle that we have. Our Parkinson's community has 8, and we and our other ones have 7 domains of care. But as you can see the slides up there, obviously these things are important: physical, communication, dysphagia, nutrition. The psychosocial is huge, the change in cognition, all the other medical stuff that goes on. What do I do in the community, and what has happened to my quality of life? And so up on the screen here, basically under each one of the domains, what we've done is created a focus area to make sure that the therapists don't forget to assess these components. It's not the end all be all, but would really, again, help help guide the therapist through evaluation, help them guide through the assessment and the treatment of person with Parkinson's. And then if a therapist ever really gets stuck, they know what to do, or they know how to come back to, oh man, I didn't think about that. I really need to address this kind of thing. One of our big aha moments was, and was really challenging for our for our therapist, was really understanding the psychosocial, community, and quality of life aspects with people with Parkinson's, but also their care partners, because this has a ripple effect. We know that. And it's not just the person with Parkinson's, but it's also all of the people that are surrounding them. And so it really, really made us understand and focus on that ripple effect for all of our people. When we decided to have all of these domains, so previously we've got the physical domain that's over here. So then we even made it a little bit delved a little bit deeper. And so broke it up into the Hoehn-Yahr scale so that we would have early, mid, and advanced stages of Parkinson's, because I think that was another thing that was this aha moment to us, is that we had people coming really early. We had individuals who also were advanced. We also, through the years, have had people that came to us with early stages, and now they're in the advanced stages, and what that means for us in terms of our treatment. So really, when we look at the early stages, it allowed us to think about how do we make our assessments. Originally, we were saying we were going to do the UPDRS, also doing the PDQ-8, and then various things like five times sit stand, 10 meter, the tug cognitive, 6-minute walk test. You guys can read all that. But what you see in the early stages kind of carries over also into the mid stages as well. But what we know when we get into the advanced stages is that we probably aren't going to be doing the 5 times sit to stand or the 10 meter walk. But what are we going to be doing from an evaluation standpoint? Really what was key is the PDQ-8. So that's that quality of life indicator and how things are going. What we did notice is that we have constantly gone, as we've gone through the domains, we're reviewing them, we're revamping them, we're constantly examining what works, what's our population, how do they present, what stage are they in, and identifying all of their goals. And really, now that we have gone through big and we have started seeing these different populations, and we've created this comprehensive programming, what we really did was made us think.
Yeah.
It made us think. So we were seeing these people for check-in, for LSVT check-in, and we really noticed that they were, like I said before, beginning to transition from early to middle to late stages. And that what this did for us, and here's an aha moment, was we weren't really thinking of the Parkinson's population in terms of an episodic care model. Meaning, we saw you for big, that's great, but now you know what? In 6 months, you've got to come back to us. You've got to come back to us so that we can treat you again and really address those things that have happened at that moment in time. So we see you for a chunk of time. Now you're coming back to us. And because of the disease progression, maybe you're coming back in 4 months rather than 6. And so then it's allowed us to make sure that we are following these people through their journey. And so when we think of the book of Parkinson's, you open up your book and you're in this chapter now, but guess what? That chapter's got to close, and we as clinicians have to begin to think differently about what's in this chapter. And when that chapter closes, we need to think again how we can treat these individuals with Parkinson's and their care partners.
Yeah, it's really about being proactive, rather than reactive. And a lot of times in rehab, I think we are in the reactive stage because they're coming to us for therapy because something happened. And so, I mean, it's been a switch for our therapists to think differently as well, of making sure that we're thinking before it happens, or how do we prevent the decline from happening as much, getting them back in here sooner. And I think it's also changing the mindset of our person served too, think of it as your oil change.
Yeah.
Come in to get your exercise modified so that you don't stop doing them.
Well, right. Because I mean, I always say your oil, I love analogies, but you don't not get your oil changed. You do that every 6 months, right? Or you need to, because things are going to start breaking down. And so we're talking about tune-ups or getting your oil changed to make sure that we're revamping the things that we need to revamp for you at that moment in time. But what really happened through this sort of our chapters, our book of Parkinson's, is that we then decided to start doing boxing for PD. Now, I told you our PD people are really vocal. And so we started a boxing program. We started aquatic programming. It trickled into cognitive fitness class, because we know that that's really important to be able to offer that. We have a support group. And then also our relationship with the Iowa chapter of APDA. One of the really cool things is that we had such success with seeing our individuals with Parkinson's, that we were getting most of our neurology referrals, or most of our MDS referrals were coming just directly to us because we had become so well established as a comprehensive program.
Yeah. So I'm going to be kind of quick in this slide, just from a timing aspect. This is kind of as our program evolved, we began really trying to continue to educate ourselves on gold standard program things that were out there. In the case of this was we did the PDQ-8, the UPDRS motor. We made sure we were collecting our outcome data. We wanted to make sure we did a comprehensive intake so that we were asking those hard questions of things like their psychological health, their financial health, of transportation, shelter, home, and food as well. So we had our clinic coordinator working with people as they did that, and then just keeping kind of up to date on the ongoing literature of things that were happening out there. And then we really looked at, you know, this particular population is a very unique population. But one of the things that we learned was that this particular population of people is always looking for more. So it's kind of like the field of dreams. We have to say it because we're from Iowa. If you build it, they will come. But for us, this was education, right? PD 101, press, PD essentials, lunch and learns, full days, conferences that we do for free for persons served and their care partners. We started support groups. We did wellness initiatives. We're celebrating their successes with graduations, Facebook, marketing. We're really traveling that journey with them. We're having tough conversations as the disease progresses and their living situations change. They need DME, like all those kind of things. And then we always have a conversation of when do you get palliative care versus hospice care involved if that's needed. And so it was our job to respond to the needs of our person served. And so we're going to we don't have time to go through all of our case studies.
Data, yeah,
but we'll give you maybe a quick brief at Karen. So
we'll see. I mean, you know, I
know, but
like
Gail, we only have 2 minutes before we got to turn it over to them.
Is that true, Laura?
Yes.
Fine.
You're okay. We don't have like a flood of questions, so I think it's great to share Karen's case study.
Okay. So, actually, there's 3 of them, but we'll see how we go. But Karen was an individual who had literally just been diagnosed, and Tammy went to a support group at one of our local hospitals, and she was like, I'm in. I just got diagnosed. I'm all in. I'm not on medication yet, but I'm in. And what that meant for us was we needed to figure out how to see her because she was still working full time. And so we actually opened up our clinic at 7 in the morning. She drove down, she saw us from 7 to 8, and then she ended up going to work. When we saw her from November of 14 to basically 12 of 14, and doing the pre-post testing. What really this is showing is what her percentage of improvement was in 4 weeks. So when we talk about that dollar amount, you know, that's really going up. When you think of somebody doing a 10-meter walk test and gaining 25%, when we look at doing a tug, the timed up and go, and another 28%, and the 6-button test at 29%.
And she was very, very newly diagnosed.
Yep.
And you didn't know, like nobody knew she even had Parkinson's.
She hadn't even told anybody. The only people that knew she had PD was her family. But in a 4-week period of time, the percentage of change, and even when you look at her pre stuff, these are great scores. I mean, these look really, really good to begin with, but man, did she improve on every single one of them. So that was key. You know, what was important to know about Karen is that she was not the tremor kind. She was rigid. And in her quest to get diagnosed, she was diagnosed with carpal tunnel. She was diagnosed with frozen shoulder, and she also had back problems. But really, all of those things were the symptomology of her rigidity from her Parkinson's. And that was what was really, really key to know. Now, that's in 2014, but she participated in 14. She came back to us in 12 or in 2020 because she's like, I've got a little bit more of imbalance going on. And so noted to have the beginning stages of dyskinesia and a forward head. She continued doing boxing, wellness, but she was not consistent in doing her exercises. These were her pre and post. Still, her 6-minute walk test improved 28% just in that time span. And her 5-time sit to stand was another 44% improvement. And here she is saying that she had some imbalance going on. Here's her single limb stance on the left on a eval 7.67, and when she left 22.5, which proves that we really have to make sure that we are seeing people episodically. Things are going on, things are changing, and it is important that they continue to come back to us. Karen was a big proponent of continuing to do all of those activities and being very, very active. At some point during this time, she also ended up getting on carbidopa levodopa, as she was not on that prior to us seeing her. Time, yes, no.
I would maybe not Mary, or Mary is a
very good example, and I'll just briefly talk to you about her. Is that Mary? Yeah, Mary came to us in 2015. She did the big program. Mary came back to us for episodic care and really felt that she had backslid. And guess what? She didn't. So even though this is where she was on big for the 6-minute walk test on the initial 12:17, when she came back 6 years later, she was 14:02.
But she religiously did her exercises,
boxing, wellness program, everything. And so that shows you that, yeah, we have a disease progression, but if this person continues to be mobile, guess what? We can continue to make progress with these individuals. That's kind of that aha moment. And here's this sweet little Michael.
Michael. Every time I see that picture of him, he makes me
sweet little Michael. And this is the progression, right? So in 2015, he was 12:55 for his 6-minute walk test. And really by 2023, he's 275. So we've got a decline, but it's also showing that we're continuing to see our individuals and working with them through the book of Parkinson's, through that journey, to make sure that we still have them.
So we just have to we have to show you our newest addition. So we actually have now transitioned to a 23,000 square foot building. Our first building was 2,000 square feet. So
it was a house.
It was a house. So a large part of why we were able to open this building has been due to Parkinson's disease, a person served in our programming, and the change in our mindset of comprehensive care with our Parkinson's population. So a recap, quick. We got like 1 minute before we have to. A recap of our aha moments.
Aha.
Okay, go for it.
Field of dreams, build it and they will come. The percentage of growth with little to no marketing costs. Like really, when we did this, we didn't know what we were doing. And we were able to build this program and really get the word out. And we are known in Iowa for our comprehensive PD programming.
Yeah. And that population will talk to
amongst themselves.
Right. And like to talk about your programming and what you're offering, and they'll tell people. And so it kind of builds on itself.
But that other subsets of these other, umbrella Parkinsonism umbrella diagnoses as well.
Yeah.
Another one, people want education. It is so important that we are providing PD 101, and we do a support group. And we do a lot of PD 101, and it doesn't matter if we've had people participating for 10 years, they need to hear PD 101 over and over and over and over and over again. You can never hear it enough. And even though you've been diagnosed for 10, 15 years, you can never hear it enough. The other thing is people need connection what happens with this disease process is that people's quality of life and world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And our job is to make sure that we're continuing to allow people to be within their social circle, their connection, they want to be with like people, but they also want to be out in the world, and they should be. And so that's another really, really big one. And then really from a director standpoint, the other big aha moment is doesn't cost a lot.
It doesn't cost a lot, right? Like relatively, when you think from a director level, cost, it doesn't cost me that much to get people trained, and to be able to start a program that will ultimately, the revenue part of it will come back tenfold for what you have to do to get your therapist trained.
Right?
Yep. Okay. So now we're ready for any questions.
Did we do good, Laura?
You guys did so awesome. And
okay, so we'll stop sharing.
yeah, no, I will share my screen briefly, but man, I'm smiling ear to ear, and it's totally genuine because your level of passion and compassion is just amazing. I mean, I had the opportunity to come see your brand new facility, which is marvelous, but without the people behind it like you, it would just be a building. And I think it's phenomenal what you have built over the years. I really wish, and maybe it'll happen someday, but I really wish there were programs like On With Life in every single area where people with Parkinson's live, because unfortunately it's not that way. Some places have great programming, some places don't, but you guys really are a great exemplar, and that's why I wanted to feature you in this webinar to, for all you therapists listening, like you might feel like it's impossible right now. I'm just one therapist, but listen where Gail and Tammy started from. They had a vision, they had the passion, and they weren't afraid to go for it. And I love what you said about Gail, like you were willing to take no for an answer. So that was amazing.
Those of you that get to know her better would understand that as her boss, I was like, finally, oh my gosh, if this just makes her be quiet for a little bit, I'll do it. No.
Well, it's so phenomenal. And, having gone to Iowa and met some of the people with Parkinson's in the community that have been served by your therapist, the proof is in the pudding. They were impacted. Anyways, we don't have a lot of time here, but I want to put this up on the screen. We do have a few questions, and also Gail and Tammy were generous enough to put their email addresses here if you have some specific questions for them. This is also on the handout. Just a reminder about the survey here to fill that out. The references are also on the handout. And if you are in Iowa, go see it. It's something else. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. There was a couple of questions that came in earlier about like, is LSVT available in my area? We get that question a lot. We have a huge directory on our LSVT Global website. So there's a big orange button that says Find LSVT Clinicians. You can search out your country, zip code, city. If you can't find someone in your area, though, don't give up. Email LSVT Global at info@lsvtglobal.com, because sometimes there's people on the back end that should be showing up. They're just not for some various reasons, we'll say. And we can help. We can also help find telehealth providers in your area too. Okay, there's a question about caregiver support groups, and I did see later on the slides that On With Life does offer that, which is really important. Is that right?
Yeah, one of the things that we discovered is that, so when we designed our support group, we really designed it based off of education. So we have educational topics that we do each month. But after we do the education, it lasts for about 30 to 45 minutes. After that, what we do is we break up into person with Parkinson's, and then we break up into caregiver support. And then we do support and sharing based off of that. With some of those individuals as well, we actually act as a resource to help with counseling. We're constantly pushing mental health and the importance of being able to have counseling and somebody in your corner. And so we do that to be able to make sure that those caregivers are supported as well, because it is so tremendous, particularly as the stages, as they progress.
Awesome. Thanks. Um, are you guys able to stay for a few more minutes to answer
Yeah.
some of these questions? If
Sure.
you're a therapist and you need to get to your next patient, go for it. You know, you don't not have to stay on. These questions also will be part of the recorded webinar. So if you want to go back and listen to what was asked and answered, feel free. But for those of you who want to stay, I think you'll like these next questions and answers that come. Tina said, I was hoping to hear more about outcomes of patients that receive LSVT loud. I know you offer that too, but because you're PT and OT, that's kind of your wheelhouse. But still, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so our loud, we actually didn't have the loud trained at the same time as the PT and OT. And so we have all that data. Realistically, in the original presentation, we have all that. Gail and I can talk for a long time. And when and we were like, oh, we could do a half a day.
Okay. Anyway, the results are pretty much the
Yes.
same. So
Sorry.
really, they're about a 40% improvement
Wow.
in the pre and post data as well. Anywhere, I mean, up to 40. And I would say really we're about 25 to 40% improvement in
general,
in
like
general.
where we
Yeah.
see.
And you know, I will say this, one of my favorite stories is that we had an individual who, his wife went to go get hearing aids because she couldn't hear him because he was not being loud enough. And after doing 4 weeks of loud, she returned the hearing aids because he learned how to be loud. And so that was key. You know, she couldn't hear him. She could hear everybody else, but not him.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing about the loud, and you know, you could speak to this too, Laura, is that we also have swallowing difficulty, right? So we have to really think about it's not just the voicing, but it's respiration, voice, but it's also strengthening the swallow mechanism. And so loud is huge.
Yes, yes.
We do
And
episodic care. We do episodic care, and it includes speech as well.
Yep.
And really, we're still focusing on voice, but it does again switch to swallow and drooling and control of those kinds of things that are related to speech.
You're right. I mean, we cannot neglect swallowing. It's a, you know, a huge safety thing, and it goes hand in hand. All
And there's
right.
a
Yeah.
cognitive component too
Oh
that we
gosh.
can't
Oh,
forget to address
Yeah.
too as progression
Yes.
happens. Our speech therapists do end up taking on, even if they're not involved, if somebody's really, really early, like just newly diagnosed, not showing a lot of symptomology, a lot of times they'll start with PT and OT and get the LSVT big exercises. And we usually do a baseline speech, so we have that for future. But we also then are making sure that we're beginning to the cognition scares people. Like that thought that they're gonna,
Yeah.
sometimes they're not ready that very first time they see us to start having the topic about cognition and dementia.
Right.
And so we're oftentimes building our chips up, and then we cash them in with that conversation as we built those in. And then talking about, let's get some good baseline data so we have something for when you come back for episodic care, and we can compare it and we can stay proactive. So that's really how we use
Yeah.
we do
That feels kind of safe, a safe way to approach that. I'm just putting myself in the shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Next question is, can you talk more about supporting episodic care for people with PD, especially taking a community-based approach? It is daunting to think about sustainability, but I love what you've done.
Wow. I mean, when
So
I hear sustainability and I'm like, this is why
I'm
we
thinking,
have this
yes,
building.
this is why we got our 23,000 square foot building.
Good, because what you're doing is you're still asking for PT/OT speech referrals, right? So you're being sustained because the big and loud is reimbursable. And then as they are coming back, you are still having referrals and you're still having reimbursable services, just like you would with any population. But your mindset just needs to change a little bit because we might need to modify. And so now, as a sort of a point, Like we have some people that we might be seeing from a short plan of care. Maybe we're seeing them for 45 days in that tune-up, and they're going to come back to us in 3 months because we know we're progressing and things change. And so we might be seeing people 2 to 3 to 4 times in a year, and it is sustainable and it is reimbursable. And so again, that's how we've been able to build our programming.
I also think about it like it's when we definitely, as they progress further with the disease process, those visits begin to look like it's ready for a U-step walker. So it's getting them the U-step when it's time. Or maybe the caregiver needs to learn transfer training so they don't injure themselves. And it's definitely, our episodic care is not a long time plan of care. It's unless something happens, like a backslid. But really, it's more of like, let's check in and let's get you training, modification, the DME. So it could
it's
just be a
also
few
sometimes,
visits.
yeah, and it's also a lot of times sort of like being that relay between the neurologist, the person served, and the neurologist, or at least being the advocate to have them make sure that they're talking to the neurologist about the technology that's changing, because you only see your neurologist every 6 months, right? And so there's stuff that's happening within that 6 months, and so we're really helping people sort of advocate for themselves during well.
Yeah. The other big component that we really begin addressing with this population is the driving. So it's kind of keeping a tab on that. We do have a return to drive, our driving assessment program here at On With Life now. We just started that about 2 years ago, where we take people on the road if we need to. But with this population, that is something that they ask a lot of questions about. And so it's also, I know that not every place can do that, but that's another thing I just wanted to. It can be overwhelming when you think about it, like but we were in such growth mode that for us it was like,
it's exciting.
It's
exciting. I love the Field of Dreams parallel. Build it and they will come. And I think, people don't always realize just the need that's out there. And Parkinson's just is part of that. There's many other movement disorders, neurological disorders, but when you build a program and then you suddenly look around and you say, hey, I'm not the only person with Parkinson's in Ankeny, Iowa. There's actually like a whole room full of us here. There's some camaraderie and support that comes with that.
Yeah, it's such a good point, Laura. So what's funny is these people meet each other in these groups, and then they go out to Wig and Pen
for a little coffee.
It's awesome.
Go out to eat afterwards, and they meet before they come to the support group.
Or if they haven't seen each other a while at a support group, they'll call, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, that's really good. It's so important.
They'll support themselves as well.
Okay, a couple comments and a couple last questions. Just a comment about how people with Parkinson's world keep getting smaller and smaller, and they crave the socialization. Their socialization also needs to be big. Yes, I love that, Megan.
Yes.
That's great. You got it. You nailed it. Another comment.
It's so small. It just honestly, it just gets so small. They don't want to go to restaurants because they're afraid of where they're going to sit. Their people can't hear them. They're also afraid of choking.
Oh yeah.
They don't go to movies because you can't walk and in between.
And those are all like legitimate things going through their heads. Yeah. Just a comment, way to share your enthusiasm and your hope. An excellent presentation. We have fewer services, and this has opened some thoughts and processes of what might be possible for our clients and family members who are working through PD. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm just going to put a plug in for, like if you are rural or if you're like a one clinician and you're really trying to grow programming, don't forget to reach out or to utilize the resources of the APDA, also the Parkinson's Foundation, the Michael J. Foundation, because there's so many. Somebody wrote something about resources. There's so many resources that out there.
Like you can download handouts that are for people on education. You can pretty much with any of those, you can order pamphlets and they'll send them to you for free for your person served.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. Okay, Dan says people with Parkinson's pay for boxing, etc. sometimes.
Do.
Yes.
So, well, first of all, I mean, there's a name brand of Rock Steady Boxing out there. That's just the name brand. I mean, but really boxing is
Yeah.
boxing because the whole idea is large amplitude movement, right?
Yeah.
Sustained, reciprocal, large amplitude movement. And when these guys get into their boxing classes, I mean, it's social. They're
Yeah.
gonna
No,
smack it.
they're not boxing each other in the face. You're
No,
right. It's
no,
non-contact. They
because
might be
they
punching
are, I mean,
bags, but
they're
not other
working on,
people.
when you think about it, it's agility, but we
Yeah.
know there's a sensory mismatch when it comes to
Yeah.
being able to follow, motor coordination. We have them yelling, not yelling, but being big, being loud. I mean, there's
Mhm.
so much parallel with just everything that you need to do to be big with boxing. But
They
they pay for it. They
they
beg for it.
they do. And that we weren't going to do it. We kept telling them to
Mhm.
go somewhere that did it, and they kept saying, no, we want to do it there. And so we did wellness programming, and we usually do like 8 weeks at a time, 6 or 8 weeks at a time for a certain amount of dollars, and they pay for that, and it's a yeah.
I mean, it's a minimal amount of money.
It
Usually
is.
we
We
will
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
$75 for
Yeah.
8 weeks, 2 sessions a
Yeah.
week. I mean, we're not trying to make money.
No.
We're just really trying to cover
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But
and
they
I
love
always
it.
think it really goes hand in hand with what they learn in LSVT Loud and LSVT Big. They can really optimize their movement and their voice through therapy and then
Yep.
use that as they're doing, big boxing and all those moves and using a loud voice. So I think it's a
We
perfect
do tell them,
match.
if you're afraid of people falling, it's not like, as a director, I was like, oh gosh, just sign the liability waiver, because
Yeah.
when I walk in there, I'm like, oh, all these people with balance issues doing it. But their balance is darn good when they're boxing. Like, it's amazing. It like gets
Hmm.
things flowing, and they do great. I think we've only had like one fall.
Yeah.
And
that,
that
Yeah.
that
was
you're aware
that
of.
I'm
That's
aware of.
probably Gail, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Is there a correlation between hearing loss and PD?
Oh, that is a good
Yeah.
question. I don't know.
I would say not that I'm aware of either. I haven't read the research. However, we know the opposite is true, that people with PD always think that everyone else has a hearing problem,
This is
just
true.
like
Which
your
is why we have to
example
go
that
get a
you
hearing aid.
gave.
Yeah.
Yes, I've never heard of someone actually going to get hearing aids, but
It was
that
funny.
that is a huge thing, that sensory
He was
mismatch.
just happy she got her money back. So
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, one last question. Do you have new clinicians trained in person for LSVT? Since you noticed a difference, I received training about 2 years ago and it was virtual, and I'm curious now. And yeah, so let us hear what you've
So
first,
kind
I
of been
first I
experiencing
want
and
to
how you
say
deal with that.
go
first I want
go
to say
ahead.
something. So we went down to Arizona. Was that 2 years a year ago or something? And we stopped for a visit to see
Borrow.
well, no, I was
Oh.
gonna say the LSVT office.
Oh,
We
yeah, we
stopped
did.
in.
Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah,
because you guys weren't doing it back yet from the
from
pandemic. You
COVID.
were just
Yeah.
getting ready to start coming back. And we bugged them enough that we're like, we want it back in person. And we actually you just started in this last year to starting to do some back in
We
person.
finally did.
Because you
Yeah.
did come here,
Yeah.
you did one here in May of this
Hmm.
last year. So it was definitely a difference, and we definitely love the in-person, because I'll let Gail share her reasons why now.
Yeah.
I was just saying we went and bugged them at
We
LSVT.
did enough. I would say for me personally, I feel like when we had individuals doing it virtually, there wasn't like the ramp up. There wasn't the I don't know. It's hard, I think, to sit virtually and to be able to get all of the bigness that you need to be. I mean, I
To
always
feel it.
to feel it. I always tell people that, you're gonna feel like an over the top, ridiculous looking cheerleader, and that's exactly how you should feel. And as a clinician, we need to be a ridiculous, over the top cheerleader.
Hmm.
As well. And I don't know, from the individuals that came back initially who had done the virtual programming, I was like, I got to see all these people with Parkinson's because I want them to do it my way. And so I feel like there's a difference. And I will also say, so we just hosted in May the LSVT Big, and we had 5 clinicians go through. And I think there is a difference personally between those who do it virtually and those who do it in person. Now, Laura, you might, you know,
Yeah.
disagree,
No,
but
no,
I
no.
really think that I think it's a little diluted for the approach that I expect the therapist to have.
And I think part of that is you get the feeling of the bigness when there's other people in the room that you don't necessarily get when it's virtual. So if we have our choice, we
Join in
prefer
person.
to send our people in person. That being said, we just want them to have the education. So like our solution when we need to send somebody virtually is then they're spending time with like a Gail or a Sue who will harp on them about that big and give them that feedback. So in that sense, we're lucky that we have therapists that really get the passion and the understanding of LSVT so that they're able to hopefully evoke that from the therapist.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way. And having trained thousands of clinicians over the last 15 years, my summative statement would be it depends on the person.
Yeah,
Because some people absolutely benefit from the energy and the attention with in-person training. That's how they learn best. However, we also have people that really need more like one-on-one. They need time to process that do well with asynchronous learning. So, I would say if you're thinking about becoming certified in LSVT or any other treatment methodology for that matter, just really know yourself as a learner and your learning style and go with what fits you. And if you're in a situation where you're like, well, I can't really go to an in-person course, it's not possible for me, then do what you all are doing and, get certified, but then find someone in your community that you can just shadow and say, hey, am I doing this like as big as I should be, as correctly as I should be? And that can be a really good thing too.
I
think it's a good point.
No, I think that's a great point. I was just gonna say, I would rather people get the education and be able to at least have the thought idea behind it, so you can bring that to more people in our communities than to if it was the difference, especially as budgets have tightened at many healthcare facilities,
and for
you can't
travel.
travel as far, right? And so I would definitely agree with Laura that finding a mentor or something is a great idea as a way to get feedback if you can't go in person. Because it really is more about, I would want people to learn about this intervention so that we can bring more to the PD community.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we are past time, but these questions were so good. Thank you all who have stayed on, hung with us. I know that you love this webinar. I won't say I hope that, but Gail and Tammy, thank you so much for being with us today, sharing your enthusiasm and passion. And I am certain that you're going to get some questions reached out to you about how do we build this in our community? What are some tips to get us going?
We would be happy to take any of those. Like, I mean, this is really, really important. Really,
awesome.
Thank you so much for having us. We've
Have
enjoyed
a great
it, guys.
day.
Bye,
All right.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.